My name is Jimmy Maxwell, and I'm chatting with Staxx.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Jimmy Maxwell.
Hey, how are you doing, Staxx?
How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm glad to be sitting here chatting with Staxx.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's an honor, brother.
So you have an insane story. Pretty wild one.
Well, it's been a long road, through my life, for sure.
So where were you born and raised?
I was born in Guyman, Oklahoma. It's just a little town in the panhandle of Oklahoma. And I was raised in El Paso, Texas, probably more than any place.
What was your life like?
Well, it was, at the beginning of it was kind of turbulent. Me and my stepfather didn't get along very well. I mean, from the get-go, I'm not even sure why. I was too young, but I do know that once my dad beat him up when I was about 4, from that point on, it was he hated me from that moment. I guess every time he looked at me, he saw my dad, which is doesn't surprise me, but it is what it is. I can't really blame my life on my childhood. I've had a lot of friends that's had a lot worse than I did, but it was a battlefield for sure.
Were you getting in trouble at an early age?
Well, when you have when you live in an environment like that, I think it's kind of pushes you out towards that because you want to get away from the inside of your home life and go outside of your home life. So you're like, you find other outlets, and generally when you're young, and you find outlets outside the home, it's not good.
Definitely.
It leads to crime. Absolutely.
So what type of stuff were you getting into?
From the earliest time, I mean, when I was like 10, I was running away from home at that time. And you live on shoplifting, if you're running away and you're a kid, that's how you eat. That's how you smoke. That's how you do everything, but I was still too early and too young to really do anything and stay gone very long. It was just, I just didn't want to be there. It was, he did not like me, like I said. And so it was just that. Anyway, he kind of choked me out when I was about 10, and my mom caught him. It was just one of those things. He just, I was a brat for sure. I'm not gonna lie, but he was, he grabbed me and pulled me into his shop and was choking me, and I was crying, and he's yelling at me not to cry, and he's, and my mom come out there and caught him before I actually passed out. She sent me to my dad at 10. So I went and lived with him for 3 years in different parts of the country, which it had its own set of problems because my dad was a pretty big guy. My stepdad wasn't so big, but my dad was.
Were you a little more cautious with your dad?
Well, he was a little more. Well, he was an alcoholic at that time. So, I mean, it was it had its own set of issues. You know what I mean?
So you traveled around with your dad?
Yeah, my dad and my stepmom, we lived in like Wabash, Indiana, Marysville, Ohio, Hutchinson, Minnesota, stuff like that, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Were you going to different schools?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was interesting, but it was also, it was also, made for a kid that was trying to fit in all the time. And, and the way I fit in was being, I fit in more with the kids that smoke dope around, under the trees, than the jocks, even though I was kind of a jock, but I still was that's just where I fit in better. So,
yeah. So when was your first time you got into serious trouble?
Well, the first time I got into serious trouble was, I got kicked out of the house when I was 13. I went back to El Paso, and, by then I had been I was dealing with a much bigger, more violent person And I went back to my stepdad, who was not, and he didn't look as big and as intimidating, as scary as he used to. And so first time he came at me, I went after him. Now he won the fight. I'm not going to lie, but he knew that it was not going to be that way for very much longer. So he kicked me out a couple of weeks later. And so I ran around, and I fell in with some people that ran back and forth across the border, and I was watching their house one time, and while they were gone, and when a couple of freaking hobos tried to rob it, and honestly, they had me there for a minute, but the tables turned, and I ended up stabbing one pretty bad. And from that point on, they dealt with the fallout. The cops didn't really get involved, but it was better for me to leave Texas. So I went back to Oklahoma, and then actually got what sent me to boys' home was I was up in Oklahoma when my mother told me that my stepfather had kind of done something that was, I don't know. She tells me that she didn't tell me he slapped her. She tells me that today, and I'm like, you did tell me he slapped you. But she changed it to pushing her, and that doesn't really matter. The point is I was like 15 and oil field strong at the time, and I was fixing to go back and tear his freaking head off. So I sold some tires for my Ford Galaxy, and I was headed back that direction when they caught me. So that got me sent to a boys' home, which started my whole career I was almost 16. I was still 15 at the time.
So what's it like walking into the boys' home for the first time?
Well, as much trouble as I'd been in already, it was still intimidating. I ain't gonna lie. You don't know what's going on. There was a bunch of big buildings, fences around it, and it was cold, and it was just frigid when I went. And it was, and as I walked up, I could see all these faces looking at me through the bars and the windows of this big building. And I'm like, all I knew is that, you have to stand up, and you have to be strong. You can't show any weakness. Same thing in prison, but as far as in the boys' home, you don't really know how to do all that yet. You're you just have to live with your life experience, what you got, which I had some, I've been around a little bit enough. I've been around enough. Let's put it that way.
But you learn as you go, right?
You do learn as you go. You get better, and you get stronger, and you get, but that's a double-edged sword, because the stronger you get, the more violent you get, the more reputation you get, the more they want to keep you away from regular people. And that's been my curse of my whole life, honestly, so it seems like.
Yeah, being in solitary confinement and just keep you locked away. But do you find, like, when you get a reputation, that people want to test you more too?
Yeah, in some ways, for sure. It's like me, I've always I'm not a bully. I've never been a bully. And so a lot of the times, what my problems are with is the bully type. And that's really what gave me a reputation, because, they all have this touch hog, reputation. And so you take down, you start working your way through them, it kind of boosts, it just makes it that more poignant, but, so, yeah, there is that. You're right. There's right. I've had a few fights and battles just because of that, for sure.
How long did you stay in the boys' home for?
I aged out, and I got out. I'm back in a couple of times, to be honest, but in the end, I aged out. We ended up I ended up in a worse place than I started. But if you can, kind of worse. The guards, the guards kind of, as I went in, weren't that bad to begin with, but there was a section of guards that were like the goon squad that was abusive and pieces of shit. And they kind of dealt with more of the kids that was in like the ad seg type area, which I didn't actually get into until I had escaped a couple of times. And then they thought they were going to teach me a lesson. Well, honestly, they did teach me a lesson. You know, I'm not going to lie. I ended up with a boot freaking print size of my head, and they fucked me up. But in the end, but I learned how to fight them. Because they weren't done just with one time, and it wasn't just me. When I got finally put in the ad seg, all them other kids were up there. I finally learned why they called it hell instead of Helena. Up to that point, I didn't really understand it, but they warned me. They were telling me. I just thought they were just wanting me to. I just thought they were juicing me, but until they come in there and they run in on me, and then, but it would happen, every couple of nights. And so I learned to get my handcuffs off and on my restraints. A lot of them were leather. And so one time they come in, I had covered my window, and I had squirted shampoo and water on that floor. And I had a water bottle ready for the light bulb that was above me. And they were like, take this window, cover this window, uncover this window. And I'm like, and it's like, come and get me. I wanted them mad. I was talking, you fucking child abusing pig, and boy, they were mad. They come rushing in that door when they got it open, and I was on that bed. I squirted the light, and it went out, and I just jumped on them. I still had cuffs on because of the last time they whooped me. I couldn't get all that off, but I got all the leather off, and I just dove on them, and we battled it out, and they me up too. Still in the end, but I fucked them up too. I messed one up pretty good. And but and it was all a learning experience. Finally they let me out. This really nice laundry lady, she was also working in the feeding us and stuff, and she found me up there like that, beat up. That was the boot prints and all that, and she got really upset. So she went to the director or whoever was in charge of that place, and she said it's been happening a lot. So she threw a fit, not just about me, about the whole thing. And they started letting some of us out of that ad seg thing. Well, I kind of graduated out of there, and they kind of backed up off of me. And I started dealing with the coach there, and we started doing it with boxing and whatnot. And I ended up getting out for a while, and then I came back later on for some other shit that happened on the street, and my parole was violated and whatever. And when I got back, well, that lady actually got murdered right before I left. They finally they paroled a bunch of us. This laundry lady was actually murdered, and
in the prison.
In the boys' home, yes. It was a horrible thing.
Wow.
The guy that did it lived right across the hall from me. And, I really liked this lady because she helped me, so it was a personal thing, really. But they let a bunch of us out because they were trying to clear it out. And so when I ended up going back, that the whole mentality of that place had changed. I was warned when I went in. One of the guards that was taking me in, he said, things have changed a lot since this happened. There's a lot of raw nerves still, and the little crew that had been running around just kind of bashing up on the guys in the ad seg their attitude had kind of taken over this place. They kind of steered a little more clear of me, though. I don't know why. Maybe because they knew I don't know, because they'd already hurt me, or maybe because I hurt them. I don't know. But they were really fucking over other kids. And finally, someone asked me, he got himself in a big jam, and I knew they were going to hurt him bad. And here they come. And I don't know. We had it. And as soon as I went over and started gunning them down, the whole freaking unit went after them, and we took over the unit and tore the phone out, threw the freaking house parent, whatever you call them, out of there, threw them guards out, and
So
pretty
it's a
damn
riot,
soon.
basically, like a riot.
It was definitely an insurrection. You're right.
Yeah. How long did that go on for?
Oh no, it was only a few hours. When you looked out the window, had surrounded it within, I don't know, an hour and a half with just, I mean, every farmer, rancher, and law enforcement was standing out there with billy clubs and tire irons, and they had the whole thing surrounded. And our unit anyway. And the kids in there, all kids, come on, coppers, you'll never take us alive and shit, and all that crap. And but here the coach, actually the guy that was leading the bunch the first time when they hurt me, he actually had changed his attitude. I don't know what did it, but he seemed remorseful about how he'd been. So he and the coach, they came to me. We let them in, and they told me that, listen, they're going to take this. They're going to use their mat. They still have a lot of hatred for what happened to Mrs. Fullerton. And they are going to hurt you guys because, it gives them an excuse to. And, and I'm like, I understood what was going to happen to my friends. And then they told me that, and there was a couple of my friends that were getting ready to turn 18 not too long, and they were like, listen, if you do, you can come out of here now, and trust me, they're gonna try to, because I broke that guy that left the footprint on me. He was in that bunch, and I broke his jaw. I guess he ended up going to the hospital over it, actually, because he didn't actually see me coming. They were over there trying to beat this one guy up, and I come in there and I slid him, and it just was. And so I was getting charged for that, and nothing I could do about that. And so I may end up even, they told me I may even get, charged as an adult. But if I didn't let this stop, they were going to come in, and it was going to happen, and a lot of people were going to get hurt, and all my friends that were close to being 18 were going to go as adults, and there was going to be this and that happen to them, and of course, they're all like, hey, we'll ride to the end of the earth for you, whatever, don't, but I mean, if you're friends, you don't do that to your friends, and it was going to happen anyway. So I ended the thing and went with them. They put me in the county jail, but the fact is like the coach that liked me so much, he kind of told me before I went out, he said, I wouldn't worry too much, because this guy's been in a lot of trouble, for things he's done. And he said, I'm going to talk to the prosecutor, and I'm going to be honest about it. He said, so let's see. And so what, nothing ever happened. They ended up coming to get me and take me to another boys' home that was off in Sand Springs that they called Little Mac, because Big Mac is McAllister, where all the adults are. And, it was a new place, and it was a whole nother experience.
You have a place out here that I went to called Little Cheshire.
Yeah,
it's similar to that. They got Big Cheshires, the adult side, and
there you go. Exactly.
But it's like a mini prison. It's just like prison.
Yeah. And the kids are, when you're kids, you all are you're trying to, you're just emulating how you think prison's supposed to be. So sometimes it's even worse than the actual prison.
And them kids don't look like little kids.
No, you're that's for a fact.
I'm like, that's a kid? No, that's a grown man. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, that's right.
He's 15. He's like 6'4".
Yeah, no.
How old are you when you get out of that?
I went to that other place, and I escaped a couple times, and we had our own little, we had it happen or whatnot.
How'd you escape?
Oh, well, one time, this kid come over out there playing softball, and he said, hey, Jimmy, I've untwisted one of this only had one fence around it. It was a tall fence, but he said they'd been over, he untwisted one of the wires in this fence. And he said, we got a hole in the fence. And so we ended up, there was about 5 or 6 of us going to go, we all went over there, and I took a baseball bat over there with me. And then everybody started shooting to the hole in the fence. and I stood there with the ball bat because the guards obviously saw what was going on, and and I got stuck kind of behind because I'm the one holding the bat, and they're like, but I didn't really trust anybody else to do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, my little Mexican friend, he come in there and pulled me back. Come on, Max, come on, and I made it, and we got through there, and we ran off into the fields, and it took about, it took probably 5 or 6 hours, and we ended up getting caught.
But it's surrounded by nothing, right?
Well, there was a river. The next time that we escaped, I'd noticed that the fence, there was two youth centers, the one that we were in, and there was another one for younger people that didn't do the same kind of crimes that we had over there. But there was a fence that connected the two, and it went to the fence we were surrounded with was super high, and the whole top of it you couldn't get your fingers in, so you couldn't climb it. But this fence that connected from the building to the fence that separated it had the bar that went across on the inside of that other section, and it was connected. So somebody come and told me that he thought he could kick the back door open, and I didn't know that he could. It was a solid steel door with a big bolt lock and all that. And
yeah,
I thought, well, okay, if you can do it, I'll be right there with you. And I'll tell you, the way we can get out of here is to get up on that roof and shimmy on the back side of that thing and over that fence and drop it on the ground. And so he started out from the very back, old chunky dude, but he was pretty fast and he was solid and he was going to kill him. As I saw him run into that door, and I thought either he's going to die and crush himself or that door is going to open. And so I committed to it. I took off running too, because I thought, it's got to open or else, and that door busted open, and there were 5 of us took off out that thing, and we all jumped up on that roof and shimmied across. And it was just me and another guy that was willing to swim the river. It had a low water dam, and it had the big dam. And so at nighttime, when in the daytime you're looking at that river, the reason that me and him were willing to swim this river is because in the daytime it looks like you could almost get mostly across it on sandbars, but at night, we didn't know that they let the water out of the big dam and it fills up. But so it's a long way across. It's probably a quarter mile across, and so, but we knew that there was shallow spots. We could see it during the day, so we went ahead and took the chance. And I had long jeans on and a long sleeve shirt on, high top tennis shoes, which is a bad combination for swimming. But
weigh you down in the water.
Oh man, yeah. My buddy. Well, the other 3 guys weren't willing to even try it. So me and my buddy, we took off, and he's a short guy, and we were out there, and it got deep kind of quick, and the current was pulling, and I'm fighting it, and because once you commit. Once you commit, you're committed. There's no going back. And so all of a sudden I seen him out come more, about 20 feet ahead of me. And I'm like, I was trying to find out if he was swimming or what. And he was gurgling and shit. And so I went down to take my shoes off. Somewhere along the way, I could feel myself tumbling around, and I felt like I better check to make sure I can still touch the ground.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of scary, and I couldn't. And when I looked over to where I had been, I was already washed out pretty good ways. So I had to just commit. There was nothing I could do except just go for it. And every time I tried to swim with all them clothes on, it was just dragging me down, like you were saying. So I ended up getting on my back, so where I could just kind of lay on my back, keep my feet, my tennis shoes above the water, and kick. And I couldn't even swim like that. I had to swim So it was, I could see a big giant newspaper in the sky with inmate drowns, or juvenile drowns in the river trying to escape, and I swear to God, I seen it in print, up there. And so I was holding on to and I knew not to panic, but I was so close to it. I kept looking over my shoulder, and the line looked just as far as it ever did. We were being washed down towards that low water dam. And, but I just kept going and kept going. And then I told my buddy, David, I said, brother, I don't think I'm going to make it. And I could hear him. He had already got his shoes off, and he was wearing shorts, and I could hear him change directions like he was going to come over and help me. And I just couldn't let that happen, because I knew how close I was to panic, and I would have drowned us both, So I turned around to tell him, yeah, hey man, don't, stay back from me. And I swear to God, I stood up in water that was this deep at that point, and I was so happy. I couldn't believe it, and he's like, he's actually further in than I am. And he stood up. He didn't even know it, but he was in water, to his waist. And I'm like, man, it's, we were just so freaking happy. And, anyway, long story short, we made it out of there. And
so you could have drowned in water that was like 3 feet, and you didn't even know.
Yeah, well, it was deeper than that all the way across, I promise you. But at some point I made it far enough on there where yeah, you're right, I probably could have. But once I started going down, I'm sure I would have hit the ground. But I just was, man, that was one of the most. I was relieved. I was relieved.
Where do you go from there? Like, do you just try to find a ride? Like, are you?
Yeah. Well, his people lived in Tulsa. This was in Tulsa. The thing where we were at was in Sand Springs, but it's not too far from Tulsa. So we walked the railroad tracks all the way down till we got to a phone, which was the west side of Tulsa, and he had his people come pick us up. Yeah.
So how long do you stay free until they get you again?
Well, that time I stayed out till I was 2 weeks from aging out.
So did they send you back just for 2 weeks?
They sent me back for 2 weeks. Isn't that crazy?
You would think that they would give you more charges for escaping, right?
Well, I mean, they couldn't. I mean, it's like they couldn't. I broke a guard's nose down there one time, and he went straight to the cops and told them he was trying to file charges on me. And they said, well, what do you want us to do with him? He's already in the deepest, he's already in the worst boys home you got,
Yeah, like
put him in lockup, I mean. But I mean, I guess they could have hit me with as an adult, but they were, I mean, at that place at that time, and they weren't, I mean, there was murderers and all kinds of sick and twisted people in that place there. They reserved it for but what got me there was that insurrection, that we had. That was what made me there. But so, there was not really anywhere else to put me, other than make me an adult. And what are you going to make me an adult for hitting some guy,
So what's it like to walk out of the boys' home at 18? And what are your plans? Where do you go?
Man, I'll tell you, I had no direction at that time. None really. I was just everything was a party. Everything was, I had nothing at that point in time. I just got out, picked up right, where I was at, went back to Diamond and drank as much and drank as hard and did whatever we could get our hands on and just partied, until I ended up catching another case, but I was an adult at that time. So
was it a lot different now, catching a case and going to the adult prison? And was it a really bad charge that you went to for the first time to adult prison?
No, actually, the first time, it was kind of a bad charge, but I went to trial. My first felonies were I had my girlfriend at the time had been shoplifting, and the guy at the store tried to grab her. You know what I mean? And I shoved him back, and I told her to get out of there. And then I just kind of guarded her back until she was good and gone. And then I had still had cigarettes on the counter, which I was paying for. And I went back, and they were like trying to tell me, "Oh no, you're waiting for the cops." Well, now I realize that they've called cops. I'm like, so I take off, and the butcher gets after me, and they get out anyway. Long story short, a big fight ensues, and I get away. I whoop the butcher and the stock boy.
Are you working out? Are you big at the time?
Well, when I'd been working in the oil field, and I worked out when I was in the boys' homes, and like I said, my boxing coach, he would I still smoked at that time, but he was always on me about not smoking, and staying fit and actually keeping myself out of trouble and all that, of course. But I didn't listen to much of that, but I had always kind of stayed fit, as far as that goes, because that boxing and all that interested me a lot, and I was pretty decent at it for a kid,
So you whooped him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And so anyway, I got away, and then and so the cops had been looking for me. You're talking about a little small town, right? And one of them saw me on a Sunday, and I saw him, and when we're just cruising around, sitting on the lots and whatever, and I was sitting between my girlfriend and this other girl in the front seat of a car, and I saw the cops go by, and I was like, "Get me the fuck out of here," and I saw their brake lights come on. And so anyway, the other cop come in, they got me cornered, but I had a knife in my hand. It was just a little knife, and I was working on her rearview mirror for her because it broke off, and I was fixing it. And but when the cops came up, I still had that in my hand, and my girlfriend, she spun around in the seat so I could shoot out there, and I ran into the one that ran up on me, and I jerked away from him. And there's the two that come out from that car that was that I saw the brake lights. They swooped around, and they're running up, and I just bowled into them, like a linebacker. We all went down on the ground, and a long story short, one of them got cut on the hand, one of them got cut on the neck. Not seriously, but enough, you cut an officer, a police, it's pretty serious regardless if you nick them or not. But honestly, I really didn't know. I wasn't trying to cut them. I just had it in my hand, and I wasn't letting go of it. I could have let go of it. I heard the other officer yelling, "The son of a bitch has got a knife." I heard all that, but, and next thing you know, I was up and I was running, but I really didn't think about having a knife in my hand. That's just the truth. Until I tripped over the railroad tracks. They're yelling at me, they're going to shoot me and whatever. And I just didn't, I just got lucky that they didn't, it's a smaller town, and I guess I just got lucky, or maybe because my back was to them and I was running away, but I didn't realize that I'd actually done any damage until I'd gotten away, and I was sitting at home, and I looked at the knife and saw that there was blood on it. So that was my first felonies, but I took it to trial, and I told them exactly what I just told you. I wasn't dishonest about it. I said I didn't know I had the knife. It was never intentional, and that's the charge. You're charged with intent, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon with the intent to do bodily harm. And I was young enough still that the jury and them didn't see an old, incorrigible criminal. They saw a high school kid, and so they did find me guilty, but they gave me 6 months for each officer, even on a felony, and I had to do a year in the county jail.
So they kind of lowered the charges.
Well, the charges still haunt me today because they didn't lower them to not be a felony. I don't know how that works because they definitely used it when they got me for armed career criminal this last time. They still used it against me for that, which ups a gun charge to 15 to whatever.
And it's assault on an officer, so it makes it even worse because they look at that like, oh, he's dangerous. The police are gonna get hurt if they deal with him, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they don't like people that do that.
No, they don't. And hell, I don't even blame them. Really. But I mean, but like I said, at that time in my life, I wasn't thinking the way that that normal people think. I was just thinking, I was just a wild ass fucking kid, that'd been in a lot of trouble and felt like I was mad at the world, you know. So,
No intentions on getting your life together back then.
I don't remember any intentions.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, back then we were just, I don't know, man. It was, I don't think I even started growing up until my first child, was born, to be honest. I mean, all the way up to that point, and that was when I was in my 20s. Up to that point, I was just, gangster, drug dealer, dope house robber, all that, and convict, obviously. But when I had my first child, things started changing. My mentality started changing, and and as I got older and they got older, it took me a long time to still get something in my head that was, like anything sort of like, hey, let me, I better start thinking about life. And then one day, I think it was not this sentence, but the last sentence, and I had gotten 50 years for 5 grams of dope. That's how bad they hated me at this point, And I ended up getting it cut to a 25, but it took me 12 years to do it. And I had a 5-year federal case to do for a gun after that. But I was buried in the H block, which is our Supermax here in Oklahoma. It's attached to McAllister, but it has no windows. It's a concrete cell, half underground. And that's where they take you to warehouse you. I've got friends that's been out there for 20 years. And, and I learned, you see that they don't, at that point, when you make it to that point, they don't care. They just want to keep you away from everybody else. I'd already done a lot of dirt. I'd already done a lot of stuff, and I had worked my way up to that point, and where they just were ready to just keep me in there. And I started looking through my photo album, and I had my ex-wife had sent me pictures of my kids, and two of them were, well, one of them was 4. My daughter was 4. My son was just a baby at the time. But by the time I got to the end of my photo album, they were teenagers. And I was like, because I did, they were, well, my son was not a teenager, but my daughter was. And they were growing up without me. And I don't know. I just realized that, once you get to that point, if you don't do something for yourself, you don't change something, you're not going to ever have any kind of life. And you know what? I decided I wanted to have life. And it just it just hit me. And I was like, I have not given anything to my family, my kids. I've given everything to this prison, everything to the people, and to the whole, to this lifestyle, which is just, all about me and all about, and I go and I talked to some friends of mine that had been there, that I'd known for 20 years, the older school of cats and shit. And there were several of them down there with me. And I was like, this is crazy, man. I was looking through my photo album And I'm like, this is like, it's really something that's kind of touched me. And that, like they're, yeah, brother, that's cool. That's, but what can we do next? What can we, how can we get this in? How can we do this? And how can we, what can we do to control this? And I realized that that's all they thought about. That was where their head was at. And if I didn't do something, that's what was going to be. That's where I was going to be. And it just made such an impact on me that it started changing something inside of me. And I just started evolving from that point. That was the very beginning of where I'm at today, to be honest. I'm not saying that was that was 20 years ago, but it took long, but
you still had to go through things to get to the point you're at today.
Yeah. And, it still took a long time to get myself, moved around in that mindset. But even as I did, and I started moving myself around in that mindset and becoming a different person that was, that actually had empathy and caring about, my life and about other people's lives. And, it took a long time. I'd already developed this reputation and this, what the people that were in charge of my life and the administrations and all that, they now have a picture of me that is, that they're not going to let go of. It took a long time. It took me so long to get out of prison this last time. It's because, and I don't think I even caught a case the last decade, of any type, while I was in prison, not a write-up, nothing. And I worked the whole time for the welding deal out at Unicor I was in federal prison. And, it took every minute of that time to get them to convince, to where I finally had people that were like, you know what, I think he's really not going to fuck up. I think he's changed. Yeah. It just takes it. Nothing's really easy. Nothing's ever given to you. And still today, the judges and all them don't give me any slack. And the prosecutor, as soon as I filed for a compassionate release, came back with, he come back with an excerpt from my book, American Outlaw, where it goes, dink, dink, dink was the sound of the baseball bat coming down, breaking one of Randy's bones with every ringing swing. They highlighted that and put that in my, that's his response to me saying, hey, I've changed. Even though the book title says American Outlaw, Price of Pride, Price of My Pride, it obviously in the title, it shows that I have had some kind of change of heart, and I'm showing my evolution of where I came from and where I finally got to. And, but that's the battle you have. It's an uphill battle. Once they believe these things about you, trying to convince them that you're not that way. And granted, there's people that screw it up for everybody. There's guys that finally make it out of prison. They go out and do some heinous ass, and then it just comes back and bites us all in the ass.
That happens all the time.
All the time. And I know, so you can't really even, you can't even be freaking pissed off about it. You can, but because, I know where I'm at, but you can't really, nobody else really knows what's going on in your head.
But you got to show people where you've been so that they don't make the same mistakes you made.
Amen to that, brother. That's kind of the whole point of everything that we're doing now. Yeah. The books, whatever, because at this point in my life, I don't want to use, yes, there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of violence as an adult. I'm not promoting myself as a badass or a violent person. But I do know that the only people that are like-minded, that are still stuck in that world and still stuck in those things and their thoughts, the only people they listen to are people that they can look at and go, that guy right there is somebody I can listen to, because he's been the same guy the whole time. He's not turned into some kind of freaking, I don't have anything. That's why I am the person that I am, and people still respect me, is because I have never. I'm the same guy. You know, I live the same rules. I mean, as far as I don't have the same mindset. I'm not out. I'm not going to ever. I'm not going to hurt nobody, and I don't. And I don't promote that at all. But I still keep myself. You know, as
A set
far
of
as
standards, right? That you
the
live
standards
by.
are the same. You know, I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
going to talk about things I'm not supposed to talk about. I'm not going to put anybody else down. I'm not going to go and say, you know, put. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not. Not. There's just the things that the things that I do and are all geared for the better, so that I might be able to help somebody else. You know, that's not to say that I ain't trying to, you know, help myself too. You know, I mean, because it all works it all works around in a circle. You know, you help other people, it helps you, and it helps you to remember where you were at if you're helping somebody that's stuck in that. And it helps you to, you know, when you talk to people about it, you talk to people about getting their shit together. You know, you remind yourself that you got to keep your shit together. You
Yeah.
know, and it's not a, and when you've had a whole lifetime of it, you got to remind yourself a lot. I mean, I even drove out to the prison. I rode my bike out to the prison the other day just so I could look at that gun tower. Just because, you know, just because you don't want to forget. And it's very easy once you've been out for a while to start, you know, thinking that it's not there. You know, it's not, you're not going back. You know, so, but anyway,
It's quick to go back. You know, if you don't work on yourself, then you're no good to anybody else, really. Right?
I agree with that, 100%.
So when you're in prison, has there been people with bad charges that come through and what happens to them?
Well, I mean, you know, you know, there's a there's nothing nice happens to people that come through there with bad charges, and you know you're not going to, you know, and I don't honestly don't have any sympathy for them. You know, the staff will say, you know, the fucking administration, and they get mad and stuff because it happens to them, and but underneath it all, you know, I mean, they're not that mad. You know, I mean, they're pretty. You know, everybody hates that kind.
They shouldn't even put them in population, I don't think. You know?
Well, they try it all the time. It's not because the people that's in charge of the prisons are okay with it, really. It's because the people in Washington or somebody, you know, even the state, they're being told what to do by the feds. They'll tell them, you have to do this. You have to integrate your selling thing. And so the only, you know, or something crazy, something that just does not fly in prison. And so they tell them to enforce these things, like you just put them people out there so that they're supposed to be on, and you protect them. I mean, what are you kidding me? You know, all you're doing, and then, you know, it's just the hell. Half the guards will be like, you know, they don't like them either. They'll be like, hey man, you know this guy.
Yeah, they'll put them out there.
Yeah, yeah,
That's bad.
absolutely. I mean, you know, I mean, and that's a good thing, really. But like I said, I'm not out trying to hurt nobody, and I'm not going to tell anybody to hurt anybody. But you know, I don't have any sympathy for that. That's just the way that it is, and they should put them somewhere else.
And we're
Honestly.
talking about like when you were in prison before. This is years and decades ago. Or have you came across people with bad charges? And like, you know, when you walk into a prison, people are talking to you and they seem like cool people, but then you find out, boom,
Oh
yo, this
man, okay.
dude's paperwork's bad.
Listen, brother. I mean, my personal experience is, listen, I ran into a guy one time that had my wife's best friend. She's like a second cousin. And it was a very very personal thing to me because, I mean, we were all in the streets at the time when this happened, when her happened. And I had just left them at the bar. And these guys came in and they're like, and her husband said, yeah, you just missed Jimmy. and they're like, "Oh my God, man, we really like to see. We wish we would have seen Jimmy, you know, da da da." And they acted like they were my friends. And so her and her husband got in a fight, and he burned off and left her like an idiot. Well, you know, she thought for sure she could get a ride home with them. I mean, they're friends. Even though that, you know, her husband wasn't really anybody, but she counted on the fact that they were my friends, which she told me this later after the fact, you know, I mean, which I don't know if she was trying to make me feel the way I did, but it worked. And it made it very, very personal to me. And eventually, well, like they took her out and they did all kinds of bad to her. You know, it was, they robbed her, dumped her out naked on the street. And she ended up getting picked up and taken to the hospital. And you know, so the cops were all involved. And
Are you on the streets at this time, or are you?
I was on the streets at the time. And when I found out what happened and who did it, I had my wife at the time look up every Randy Staggs in the book in Oklahoma City. And she finally found somebody that said he's not here right now. And so we went over to that place about 3:00 in the morning, and I had a 38. My wife, you know, I didn't have Mike, is Michelle's, the one that got her husband. He wasn't, none of them, they weren't with us. It's just me and my ex-wife. And we found this house, but the truck that she described wasn't there. But I knew it was their house. I can't remember why, but one of the windows was open, and I told my wife at the time, I said, if that had been you, I said, I'll tell you what, and I should just do it right now. I'd go through that window and I would take whoever's in that freaking house. If it's his mama, I don't give a fuck. I would take them and make them come to me, you know, and she's like, you know, I said, you know what? It's 3:00 in the morning. There's nobody out here. I mean, I could just do this. And she's like, no, you can't do that. This is Mike's. It's right to do this. It's not your right to do this. And I was like, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Husband. You mean the husband. It's the husband.
The husband's right. Yeah. You know, he'd been in prison. You know what I mean? Hell, he was a ex-con. And, you know, to me, in my mind, I'm like, that made, you know, you're absolutely right, 100%. So let's go over there right now. You know what I mean? So I drove my ex-wife. We drove over there. I sent her in there to go take the girl, Michelle, to another room. And I pulled him to the side and I said, I found their house. I found their freaking house. This is what I would do. And I got, you know, man. And I said, listen, I got a gun and we'll go over there and I'll help you. I mean, because I feel responsible a little bit. And I said, listen, you know, I'm down. Let's handle this. And he's like, Jimmy, now listen, I didn't understand this at that time. Now they had a daughter. I do understand a little more now than I did, you know, but at that time in my life, what he said, Jimmy, our lives have been turned upside down so bad right now. I don't want any more trouble. And I was white. I was blown away. I couldn't even understand that. I couldn't even fathom what he was saying to me like that. It changed my opinion of him like that. And not that I completely quit with him after that, but I mean, I just stumbled out of his house. I told my ex-wife, you know, Mary Jo, come on, let's get out of here. I couldn't even understand it. And but I dropped the whole thing. And anyway, those guys got caught because of what they did and how much they dumped her out, and you know, she had to go to the hospital. She knew who they were, whatever. So they got caught. And then the trial, you know, the whole trial thing was coming up, and she was she didn't have the most spotless past and everything. And there was some things about her past that she didn't want her husband to know and this and that. And so my wife was telling me this, and I got a hold of her and I told her, listen, just drop the charges and I'll handle it. Just let them out. You know what I mean? And I just about had her convinced that to do that. And when they pled guilty to robbery, and the was in there, but it was buried, you know. And so they sent them to prison. Two of them, brothers. I was still out on the streets at the time, and like I said, I still talked to him, and I watched Michelle. She had a really rough time. I didn't understand victims at that time like I do now. I mean, it changed my opinion of how that. I saw what she went through. It was a rough. It was really deep-seated thing. You know, I mean, it wasn't like you just went out and got taken advantage of. It was a scarring event for her, and I watched it develop, and it just, you know, like I said, it was a personal thing to me because of what she told me. And
did they get years in prison for this?
Yeah, they got 25 years. You know,
25. Holy.
Which is nothing really compared to, like, I got 50 for 5 grams of, you know what I mean? That's like, it's insane how they do. 25 is still a big sense. Don't get me wrong, but it's not. I mean,
No, yeah.
Anyway, they would ask me, like Mike would ask me, hey, you know, you've got all these friends and these bros and stuff, that can I pay them to do something? Because they get the victim reports of where they were and this and that. And, you know, to be honest, I wanted to do that. I wanted to help them, but I have a problem with, real problem with asking somebody that would put their life on the line for me
when he wouldn't do it himself.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't do it yourself when you had the opportunity. You wouldn't do it yourself, and you want me to ask somebody that's that loyal to me to you know, I just couldn't do it. I mean, so like years later, I was in prison. I was in a private prison where there's no sex offenders supposed to be there, right? I was sitting in the mess hall one day, and a friend of mine named Junior was sitting there digging around his peas and carrots, and he said, hey, man, you know Randy Staxx? And I was like, yeah, I know the motherfucker. I said, why? He said, oh, he just got here last night. I said, where the f is he at? He said, oh, he's over there in the child line. And I looked over and I saw that motherfucker, and I just turned my brain. I don't know what happened to me, but it just turned white. And so I just got up. I went through my tray and deal into the tray deal, and I walked out, and I was headed straight to my unit. And a couple of my friends saw me, and they're like, what's wrong with you? What's going on? I said, I need a knife. Get me a knife. I didn't even own a knife at the time. You know what I mean? I didn't have to. But, you know, if I needed one, there was plenty around. And so but doesn't seem like there was a single knife around when I needed it right then.
Nobody wanted to give it to you, right?
Yeah, and then my buddy, he's an older guy than, you know, he'd been with me for many years around, and, you know, he just knew the look. And then he asked me what's going on, and I told him. He said, oh my God, no, you can't. He just knew I was going to, you know, kill the guy. And he said, no, man, what about your kids? You know, and I'm like, just get the fuck away from me. I don't want to hear it. It's not no time I'm not thinking about none of that. I'm dealing with this, you know what I mean? And just get the fuck away from me, because he was saying a lot of good stuff, things that would get in my brain if I listened, and I just couldn't deal with it. So I just shoved past him, and I couldn't keep looking for a knife because he was following me around like, you know what I mean, chirping in my ear. So I just grabbed a belt and a couple of locks and headed out. I knew that he was going to be out on the yard as soon as he left the mess hall. And so here I'm going, and Dickie's right behind me, still trying to, you know, great friend, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you know, this is just not the time for it. And I go and I hit I get to the gym. I spot them playing softball out there. And I'm like, I saw the bats laying against the backstop. So I went out there and I snatched the bat up, and I'm scanning the yard at the same time. I'm actually looking for him and another guy, because there was another guy that owed me money, and it was time to deal with him too. And I was like, I'm going to jail, so I might as well take out both of these clowns, if I can, what I mean? get my money's worth.
Super.
Yeah. So, but one of the owed me money wasn't out there, but Skaggs was. Staxx.
Where was he? He was playing softball?
No, he was just over against the wall talking. Matter of fact, he was talking to the guy I was in the mess hall with, eating with, and but Junior did. He didn't really know. I didn't say what happened about it. I didn't say anything. I just I don't even know what happened. I don't even hardly remember putting my tray up. I just, just saw red, and he's over there talking to him, and I got that bat slung over my shoulder, and I'm headed over towards him, and Staxx is, he sees me over Junior's shoulder, and he's like, hey, Jimmy, what's that? And, he didn't even get the whole thing out before I crushed his freaking collarbone and knocked Junior off to the side too. But I put him on the ground with that first swing, and it broke his collarbone. And then I honestly wasn't thinking about killing the guy. I wasn't thinking about not killing him. I was just going to crush his freaking brains out. You know what I mean? And of course that would kill him, but I wasn't thinking like that. I just was.
Just wanted to
swinging, and I'm just swinging at him. And the funny thing about it was an aluminum ball bat. You would think that it would be when you break somebody's bones, it would be a crushing, cracking sound, but it was just dink, dink, dink. That's why I wrote that in that book. The sound of the bat. You know what I mean? It was surprising to me, but so you don't even realize what the damage you're doing. But so he's on his back, and he knows he's fighting for his life, or he's trying, and he throws his legs up, and I break them. He throws his arms up, and I break them, and he rolls. He just crawdads as best he can away from me, because I'm trying to crack his skull open, and I don't even think about it. I'm just thinking about what he did, and the emotions that I had and the emotions that I saw her have. It's just, I couldn't even think about it. It just was, I don't even know. I didn't even catch myself until, my friends had kind of all gathered around and kind of blocked us. There was guards on the perimeter. There was a guard on the damn yard, and I'm like, so at some point I heard Dickie telling me, Jimmy, stop. They haven't, they haven't seen you yet. They haven't seen you yet. And I'm like, and so I'm looking down at this sack, and I'm holding that, and I'm like, what? I can't even believe that. And I'm like, I stop and I see the guys around me kind of blocking me, and I'm like, they haven't seen me. And so I hit him a couple more times, and he's still throwing up his hands. He's throwing his broken arms up, and I'm watching his fingers go in different directions as I hit his hands. That's how, I'm shooting for him. He knows I'm shooting for him. He's giving everything he can except for his head, to protect his head. And at that moment, I realized that if I don't kill this guy, I might get away with this. And if I did, though, I definitely would not. It would change. It all kind of come down on me at one time. I my brain caught up with my body, I guess. And I was like, so I stopped again. And I told Dickie, I said, what about now? And he said, no, I don't think so. He said, well, wait a minute. The cop looked up. He said he looked up and looked like he saw what you're doing, and he went right back to picking up cigarette butts. It was an older guy, older guard, and so I'm not trying to put him out there, but but they believed that he saw me and decided to not see me. And So I don't know if that's true or not. I didn't even see the guy. All I know is at that point in time, I realized that, this guy was crushed. He was gone. He's not going to be the same ever in life again. And I don't need to kill him. And I had delivered justice, in my opinion. And so I told the second, he's laying there in his, and I told him, you're lucky I didn't find a knife. That motherfucker be hanging out your chest. And I handed the bat off, and I walked off. I went into my cell, and there's 3 or 4 guys standing out in front of my cell. And I was just thinking about the guy that owed me money because I knew they were going to come get me. And I heard somebody saying, "I got to talk to Jimmy right now." And
here's your money.
I told him he'd already knew what was going on. He just got off the phone. He said, "Hey, your money's on the way as we speak." He said, "Just so you know." And yeah, it's like, so I said, "Well, it's a good thing because I was fixing to come see you next." And but the crazy thing is that they didn't come get me. They did not come lock me up right then. It was about 3 or 4 days later that they locked me up, and it was actually for something else. However, the cops did come tell me that they knew that was me, and I'm like, "Well, why didn't you lock me up?" Well, and they're like, "Well, I wouldn't. Nobody, people were telling on me, but nobody would put nothing to paper." And really, the fact is, I think he wasn't supposed to be there. The guy was not supposed to be on that yard. And I just think that at the end of the day that
they made a mistake.
They made a mistake, and they didn't really want it to be like blasted out there. But they did get rid of me as soon as they could, obviously, without that being the highlight of the situation.
But were you nervous that they were going to come in there and get you like those 3 days? Were you like, "Damn, I'm going"?
I was amazed that I was already packed. I just assumed it was going to happen at any time. You know what I mean? But and as it went on, there was one of those administration people did say something, like I should be sitting in the courthouse right now. You know what I mean? But they just still didn't lock me up. You know what I mean? I do not know why, I swear, but I'm assuming that it had to be because of it was a private prison and they had made some errors.
So if this was a state facility, you probably would have took the ride, right?
I probably would have been, still doing time over that. But now, listen, the guy lived. You know what I mean? That didn't kill him. He's still crippled, and he's still wearing those scars. But I mean, he had to be carried off for sure. I'm not bragging about this either, by the way. I'm just telling you a story. You asked me, about that kind of a situation, and that's one that I personally can tell you about.
It's a wild
and one. I really do stand on it anyway. To be honest, I don't feel an ounce of regret for that, but I am not that person anymore. I don't think that way, and I wouldn't do it. I don't believe I would act that way today. I think, I've evolved a lot. I'm just a regular guy.
It's crazy how different, right? How different your feelings can change from one period of time to another.
Yeah, it's I've definitely evolved. That's a tough one because I do feel just as impassioned about it now as I did then, except my life matters to me more. My life matters to me more. In my life of my wife and my kids and my grandkids, my involvement in their lives matters to me more than it did then. I was willing to let my anger and my own guilt just overwhelm me to the point where if I killed him and I got a life sentence, it was, I was willing to do that, but I'm not today. That doesn't mean I don't feel the same way about somebody like that. Yeah. It just means that I am just like every man in this probably country would feel about that same thing, but not every man would give up his life and give up the fact that his wife and kids need him.
I mean,
And
look, the husband. You see
the,
what the husband said, right?
the husband makes more sense to me today.
But the
Although
other thing he was saying, how make someone else do it.
no, no, you're 100% right. I'm not saying it. It's just the point where the only thing that is the point that he had. See, like I said, I didn't really snap about his daughter. They had a newborn, pretty much. I didn't think about that till years later when I started trying to I'm writing. It might have been before I wrote the book, but during all that, you think when you're writing a book about stuff, you're thinking about the things that make things the way they are. People think the way that they think, or why they responded the way they responded. And, at that point, I was already realizing that I had really let my children down. I mean, I had spent all these years in prison when I should have been home, taking care of them, guiding them. My son is in prison right now for a very long time, and I should have been there. And so if I would have been on a different path earlier, I could have been. So anyway, I understand. I figured out that where he was coming from at that time. He's probably still a coward. I don't know, but the thing about it is the one thing. But it doesn't. It's not a coward to want to be there for your people that are counting on you, that love you. But whether I'm saying he still may be a coward because he may have but not because of what he said right then, but just because I don't know what was in his heart. I don't know that that was all that was in his heart. You know what I mean? But if that was what was in his heart, because he cared about his child so much that he did not want to risk any further damage, to his daughter and his wife by him getting in trouble, that I respect. That I can see and understand and get my brain around. And anyway.
I used to never understand it either when people would say, "Oh, you can't," but then you're not going to be there for your kids once you're gone. You do something, then you're not going to be there for your family and your kids.
Yeah. Well,
You
when
know?
you missed your life, like when I got out last time, my son was 16. I knew that it was bad. And because he's like, Dad, why you get out here trying to tell me what to do now? Where were you? He's doing that stereotypical shit. That people say that their kids, that's is all happened, And I tried to tell him, I used to do speak outs and stuff for the kids and stuff. And I knew some youngsters that were doing a lot of time because they were trying to steal. One was trying to steal a motorcycle. He did steal a motorcycle, and the cops were after him. He was 4 blocks ahead of him, and the cop was coming through. He ran a red light, and he got hit and killed. And they charged him with this murder because of the crime that he was committing caused this accident.
Yeah,
I don't understand that because if you didn't actively have any intentions of harming this person, how can you be charged with murder? I think they kind of stack all the laws against you. I get it. I mean, I understand. People are tired of crime. People are tired of this and that. But let's not just keep things in the reality of the world. In reality here,
yeah.
I mean, the guy, But so I use that as an example a lot of times with kids. Though the fact is he got that time. He got 85 years for that.
Maybe
And
reckless. Maybe reckless. Right?
Yeah.
Reckless voluntary manslaughter. Like he
Yeah.
didn't mean to do it, but they charged him with murder, right?
Murder, second-degree murder, or something like that. And he got 85 years. And so, I tried to tell my son, and I said, you got, this is what happened to a friend of mine. You know what I mean? And this is this you gotta guard your life. And I mean, the next thing you know, I mean, I was back in prison by then, but he was off on drugs, and he was trying to steal a freaking he was trying to steal a truck, and it was foggy, and the truck was running, and so he just jumped out of the car he was in and ran over there and jumped in there, and tried to get off on it. Well, the owner, this lady, she ran out there and grabbed onto the truck and was holding on to the truck. And he didn't know what was going on. He couldn't see out the windows, and he's hitting reverse, and he's trying to, and he ended up running over the lady, and she died. And it was, it was the same kind of thing, you have to, so, and he's still in prison, and I feel, I mean, the family of those people, I mean, I feel for them. There's nothing I can do to change it. I would if I could. My son couldn't believe that that's what happened. He never intended to do that. He wouldn't harm a soul. Then he was, but he, but he did, and this is what happens. And you do, you got to pay for what you did. But he's got 45 on it for that.
One decision can change your life forever.
One decision at 18 years old. But the whole idea is to get to the younger people and try to just convince them to care a little bit, just to think about what you're doing just a little bit, so that you can see what could happen, what might happen to this, like that one decision can do to change your whole life. And my son he's in the shoe right now, in the place he's at. And, I talk to him now that I'm out of prison myself, and I'm able to, take his phone calls and chat with him and stuff. And, I mean, to give somebody hope that's, looking at their life, just we're going from 18 to 40, it's hard, but, I try to tell him that all the time I've done, I mean, if you would have told me that I was going to do 35 freaking years or more, I would have probably, I guarantee you that I probably would be feeling like as hopeless as he does. You know what I mean? And there's probably been times that I did, and I, like, when I had all that time, I was pretty crazy, but just trying to give him hope and understanding that the one thing about time is it passes. It continuously passes. And, I was a younger man, and now I'm an older man, but, life is still good. And, now that I can see what life is really about, I can really appreciate it at this point in my life. You asked me when I was 18 if I had any goals or any thoughts. Like, I didn't, but I couldn't appreciate it then. I do now, and it makes it that much better for me, I think. And we know now we're at a point where life is about trying to have a good life, to help other people, and to avoid the things that can steal your life and steal the time that you have on this earth away from you, because it's one thing you can't never get back.
Kids need role models nowadays, Kids are looking for that, like the father figure, the cool guy, they need that in their lives.
Yeah.
I needed it when I was a kid.
Me too. Me too. Me too, for sure. Yeah, and it seems like the only people that people will listen to anymore is people that's been through it. I mean, if some kids are more susceptible to than others, but not just kids, but young men that are involved in all kinds of things. If they see somebody that's been down through there, that's still respected on all sides of the aisle,
Yeah.
And, they tend to. That's my hope and goal, anyway.
How much different was it in prison for you, being wild in prison versus trying to put your life together and do the right thing?
Well, the one thing, I mean, probably the biggest difference is when I'm on I don't give a status. People walk a wide path. You know, and so there's a lot of things you don't have to deal with. A lot of little bullshit that fucking you don't have to even think about because nobody's gonna cross you. As they know you don't care and you're gonna do whatever you're gonna do, and they don't want none of that. But so when you start changing and you start becoming, when you start, kind of layering down and start, like putting out a different message, then things, the people they're not as terrified of you, and they're not as afraid to cross lines here and there because and truth of the matter is that it's just that just goes with the territory.
Sometimes you got to let go, right?
You just have to, if you're ever going to change. I mean, if you're ever going to walk a different walk, you have, and it's I think, that part of the lessons in life. I think you learn them on the streets too, right? I mean,
I was in rehab once, and this kid said some vulgar shit to me, and I wanted to knock him out, like I normally would have.
yeah,
But I'm like, if I don't change and I don't like make a difference now, then I'm never gonna change.
Yeah. And then look what it developed into your life, though. That's what inspires. I mean, that's one of the things that keeps me, in my life too. But what I see, like that moment in your life, if you would have went down the wrong road, you wouldn't be where you're at today.
No.
You know what I mean? More than likely. You know what I mean? So you make these decisions in your life and you start changing at that point in time. You just start changing. Okay, so, and then you let this, you're a bigger man at this point. And at some point, at the beginning, I think you start doubting yourself and you start going, did I, mama, should I let that go?
It's not easy. It's not easy.
It ain't easy. But at some point, you start realizing, then you start believing. The fact is that hell, yeah, I should have let that go. What am I going to freaking go? Stab this guy because, he's freaking let freaking stupid ass words come out of his mouth. I mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to go out here and I'm going to trick off my life. My wife has been waiting on me for 10 years. And, now because somebody freaking cut in line on me in the freaking chow hall, I'm going to freaking beat his freaking head in and then go to the shoe. And then I'm going to end up losing this good time. And I'm going to do this and that. I mean, at some point in time, there is still a lot of people and me at one time that would have said, fuck yeah, you're supposed to freaking not, don't take nothing. But at some point I have gotten to the point where I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm not fucking tricking myself off for that fucking stupid motherfucker. You know what I mean? And so it's a fucking like a huge change in the way you think. But I am confident enough, and people respect me enough to actually listen to that and kind of like, yeah, you're right. You know what I mean? And that's the beginning of a thing. I think that's the beginning of them changing, just listening to the common sense that, the things that, prison ain't like it used to be, first of all.
Tell me about that. The people that were in prison before, right? The hardened criminals, the back in the day types of people versus now, the gangsters, the pretend gangsters, and this and that. Is it drastically different from when you were in prison back in the day?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, honestly, it's a whole different world right now. I mean, there was always drugs and stuff in prison, always was. But it's just a different thing now. I mean, there's this stuff called K2, and it's some crazy shit. It's they can't detect it in the piss test and shit. So everybody in there is doing it, and it's except everybody,
crazy, right? It makes them go crazy.
These idiots are coming out of their cell naked on the run. And crawling down the stairs yelling, about you know, they're yelling for God, and you know, and all these other clowns are looking at him going, where can I get that? That's got to be really good. I'm like, you know, so now the solid. So the one good thing is the solid community, like you know, not just whites, but the most there's blacks and Mexicans. They don't like their people doing that shit. You know, the ones that are a little more you know, convict minded, more mature minded, the ones that give a shit about what the impression that the rest of the world care, you know, hold about their who they are. You know, they're like they're that's not that. No, we ain't doing that no more. It's finally getting to that point where, you know, people are putting some kind of foot down, but it's just the epidemic right now. I mean, it's ridiculous. It makes them crazy as shit. I mean, you can't even. I seen a guy just right before I got out, scooting down the run right in front of the cop shop, all the way down the run, you know, screaming that he was going to die, you know. And the cop came out. They're so used to this crap anymore, and he says, "What's going on out here?" And this guy says, "Oh, somebody bet him he wouldn't do that." You know what I mean? Somebody dared him to do it. You know, just some lame ass excuse. And the cops, you know, he didn't want to deal with that if he didn't have to. He just went back in his office. But you know, I mean, it's just so, because he knew, first of all, if he did go get him, the guy's going to go down there. They're going to piss test him. He's going to be clean, and then he's going to send him right back. You know, I mean, it's just it's one of those situations where it's. But that's just one little aspect. There's not the fact is the mentality of the, you know, the integrity. I mean, you know, I say integrity. When I was young, I think I believed in the convict code. I'm a person that is, you know, I'm easy to read. I mean, you get what you
It's pretty simple, right? You don't tell on
get what you
people.
get.
You respect people. You don't tell on people. Like, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, you just, yeah, the convict code. It's like, and you know, I believed wholeheartedly in, you know, because and I am what I say I am. You know what I mean? But I didn't realize that not everybody is like that. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of older convicts that I held a high standard that didn't, you know, that later on, years and years later, you know, that didn't, they changed, or that you find out things that don't really mesh with the what they tried to represent. But so you learn about people, you learn about that, and you start developing your own, you know, that's one of the things that helps you to become your own man too, you know. And you're like, you know, you realize that you can't count on other people to be who you are. You need to be who you are, and be solid to yourself, and be solid to your friends. And you know, so I just say all that to say that, you know, there is a huge difference. There is, but because it seemed like there was a lot of integrity and stuff with the convict code back then, and there was to some degree, you know what I mean, because there are a lot more than so there is now. But now there is none. It is not. It's really not. You know, there's the people. You know, it's very clannish, and it's very, you know, segregated. Of course, prison's just like that. That's just the way prison is. And you know, and the whites will stand with the whites, and the blacks stand with the whites, and the blacks. I mean, and you know, so on, so on. But you know, that's about as far as the integrity goes that I can see. You know what I mean? It's people don't pay their bills. They're always backbiting. You know, they're lying and cheating and stealing and doing drugs and doing all that. And I'm just not you know, it's just a different environment. It makes
stealing, right? They used to not have people stealing. If you stole, you'd be bounced out of there.
Oh man, you'd be stabbed, or you'd have your hand slammed in the door. You know what I mean? Them big metal doors, you know, you get caught, you know. And then now I'm not saying there's still prisons that are, you know, pretty, you know, definitely strict about that kind of stuff. But you know, as you get to like in the last 10 years, I was at a medium security. So at that point, you know, you're like the people. So you lose a lot of that heavy duty respect, because all these people are trying to get home. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they catch a guy stealing, you know, it's you know, you have to deal with that, you know, whoever groups he's in, you have to deal with it, but you're not breaking his arm. You're not smashing his hand. You're not stabbing him. You're running him off the yard, you know, but I'm, you know, but, you know, I can't say a whole lot because the last 10 years, like I said, but I pretty much just, you know, I just worked and did my thing, and people stayed, you know, they didn't fuck with me like that.
I want to hear about Lockup when the cameras first came into the prison.
That they just came and got me out of my cell, you know, and said, "Hey, man, you some people that want to talk to you." So they took me down. I was actually in the county jail from that last escape, and they pulled me down to some little interview room, and that's when I seen the cameras and all this stuff going on, you know. And the lady Susan, I think her name was.
Yeah, I think her name's Susan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She said, "Are you?" You know, she asked me if I was interested in doing this. To be honest, I really wasn't at the time, but she started telling me, you know, because they'd been kind of following my son. He was I told you he had gotten in that trouble. Yeah. And he was at the other end of the jail. He was in lockup too, but they wouldn't let us together because this is the way Oklahoma is. And she's like, "Well, how long has it been since you saw your son?" And it had been a few years. And I knew he was in trouble, and I knew that they would not let us together anytime soon. You know, she told me that, you know, we might be able to make arrangements for you to be able to see your son, you know, if you're willing to do this little interview. And I said, "Well, just depends on what you want to talk about, you know." So I agreed to do it, you know, under those conditions, and then we took off from there. It was surreal, if I'm not gonna lie.
How long were you doing at that time? You were waiting for an escape charge. How did you escape that time?
Well, it wasn't that big a deal. It was a lower security, but they I tore my shoulder out of the socket, scaling a fence. Well, I didn't, not scaling it, but falling off the damn thing. And you know, I'm a hard headed, and I just refused to give up. You know what I mean? Once, and I had all my federal time behind me still. You know, when getting where I was at was the real escape. Getting to where I was able to escape was the real deal. But I mean, it was it still had fences and whatnot, you know, and all that, but it wasn't as high as security as some of the other places. But you know, when I knocked my shoulder out of the socket, it changed everything. You know, I mean, when I got up and I took off, and I had to hold my arm over my head because, you know, when your arm is out of the socket, you know, it's very heavy. It's very heavy. You know, I mean, it hangs down to, you know, it hangs past your damn knee, because I mean, it was literally all the way out of the socket, not halfway. It was completely out. And so I'm holding it over my head with my fingers and stuff. And I made it.
You're running like this?
Yes. And I'm crossing fences like that. I can't let go of it at all, because as soon as I do, there's nothing holding it in. The bones are not inside. And it just, so I'm ripping my pants and crossing over the barbed wire fences and stuff. And then I finally make it to almost to the highway, which there's cops sitting up on the hill. I can see their lights, but it's still foggy, luckily. But the fog was lifting, and I knew I didn't have any time left. So I had a gray coat on, and I just took off walking across this low part of the field, and I managed to get across it before the fog lifted. And then by the time I got next to the highway, it had completely cleared. And I'm laying in a little ditch with the highway right beside me, but I'm away from the prison enough that, you know, honestly, I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. I had a cell phone with me though, and I called the guy that was supposed to come get me, and I told him what the situation was, and he's like, are they after you right now? You know what I mean? I should have known then that he's gonna get flaky on me. But in the end, he said he was gonna come, and I laid in that ditch and I thought about what I was gonna do, with my arm being out of the socket. I couldn't I was gonna have to get it put back in the socket somewhere. And I can't you can't go to the doctor, you can't go to the hospital. It's not, it's just not gonna work out. And
There's
so
no
I
way to
thought about
push it. There's no way to push it back in. Like,
it was completely out of the socket. I mean, completely out. It was actually this shoulder. And I'm like, so I was actually running like this. And when I was laying in that ditch, I'm like, how would a doctor put this back together? How would a doctor put it back together? He's just gonna knock you out, and then he's gonna jerk that thing back into place. So I put like I said, my arm was longer than it normally would be because the shoulder was down here, and so I put my hand around my foot and my other hand over my hand, and I pressed my feet. I pressed my feet and stretched it as, and honestly, I didn't think it was going to go back in. I just didn't know what I was going to do. There's no way I'm going to turn myself in. There's just no way I could give up. And I'm still facing all this federal time. What I mean? This is my only chance to not have to do this big federal case I got left, which was a 18 and a half years, deal. But it was running concurrent with my state time, which I had done a few years on, but it was still a big old chunk of time. You look at that almost got away with it episode and they say, well, he had 3 years left. Well, that was not true. What I mean? I had 3 years left of that state sentence, but I had all this other, I had 18 years left of the federal sentence. So
so that's like 22 years.
Yeah. So I'm not, well, it was running concurrent, but still that leaves me, 15 years left, and I'm not wanting to do that. I just did 16 and a half before that. I was looking to get away from out of this. I was looking to get out of doing that time. And, but it wasn't that big a deal. I didn't worry about correcting them. Shows sometimes they get little things wrong, and you know what, it's, as long as they're not slandering you, you're all right. It's just what it is. And so, although I did catch I saw some stuff, 3 years left. What an idiot. What I mean? But whatever, just say what you want. But the fact is I had 15 left. So I wasn't trying to give up. That's how important it was, And so I laid there and I pressed until freaking tears squirted out of my eyes. And I thought it wasn't going to happen. I could feel it stretching. I could feel the thing stretching, but I didn't know if I was in the right position for it. But your body wants to go back the way that it's supposed to be. Thank God for that, because that last little push, when I was like almost crying and desperate, and I just pushed, and it sucked back into where it's supposed to go, went thump, thump. And I felt it slide back in there, and I actually had some control of it. I was like, oh my God.
Wait, so you pulled on your arm?
I pulled it. I had it
with your leg.
I had on my foot, and my arm was this much longer than it's supposed to be because it was out and down here. So I was able to get it around my, hold on to the bottom of my foot and grab it with this other hand and just press it. And at some point in time, it went back in, and I was so relieved. I mean, it just changed everything. I knew that I could get away then. I knew that we were going to make it, or I believed I was, and so it was it was such a relief. And I still couldn't really use it. Don't get me wrong. It was still fucked up, but now I could hold it down here. It was back where it's supposed to be. The weight of your arm, believe it or not, when it's all the way out of the socket, is horrendous. It is something that you can't bear. That's why I had to have it over my head.
Yeah.
because it's not bearable to just hang it, the weight. But so anyway, it's back in, and I spotted a way to kind of like get to the tree line. And I told the guy on the phone when I was laying in the ditch, I still hadn't had my shoulder back in yet. I told him, look, I'm going to figure out what to do, and I'm going to try to get to this tree line I see down the road about half mile, quarter mile, and it kind of veers in towards the highway a little closer instead of this big wide area of bare ground. And so I made for that. And then I got down there and I realized it was because a creek went underneath the road, and so I got on, I went through the culvert all the way to the other side of the highway. And I got on the side and I called him, and that son of a bitch didn't answer. And he didn't answer, and I only had so much stuff on charge on my phone. So at that point, I called my stepdaughter, and she just dropped everything, came and got me. She made her boyfriend actually drive his car and come get me.
So you get away. You get away this time.
I got away from that place, but I didn't get away for very long because what I didn't anticipate was they had been looking for me. They had chased me for months, and the months when that one episode where that I had the motorcycle wreck and all that stuff, and I'm running through the woods. That was actually, they chased me for months with that, the fugitive task force. And so as soon as they found out that I had made it to a low and that I had escaped, they just blew their top. They're like, I had no idea it was going to be that big a deal. And so I get back, and obviously I can't go where I was planning on going. And I got my arm in a sling, and my daughter's like, well, you can go over here into my place. And I'm like, no, I can't. There's no way in hell I can go over there. That's the first place they're gonna look at. And she's like, no, they're not. They don't know. Nobody know where I live. I just got this place, and her boyfriend's like, yeah, it's in my name. Da da da. And I thought, well, I can probably go there for a couple of hours, and get some clothes, and take a bath and eat and get focused on where I'm going. And so to reevaluate my situation. So I go there, which is obviously a big mistake. Everybody, we all can see that coming. So I wake up, I take a bath, and I wash up, and my arm is still in a lot of pain, and I'm laying there, and I wake up, and to her coming into the room with the phone, I got some bros on the phone calling me, and they're like, turn the fucking TV on. And I turn the TV on, and I'm blasted all over every channel. I mean, and I realized then my mistake, and it's so I'm like, I got to get out of here right now. I got to leave right now. And luckily, and I did. So I ended up with the guy coming over to get me, and I just made it out. Somehow I asked my daughter, I started quizzing her about, who's been to her apartment, who did, I'm looking for leaks. And, I saw a couple that they didn't really see. And I'm like, so, anyway, we're getting out of there. But as we leave, I see there's some strange going on in the parking lot, but nobody stops me. And as we drive off, I can see nobody following us because we had to drive out of there and drive around a big field and drive it. And then we turn the corner, and there's nobody behind us. Nobody jumped. Nobody's a block away or half a block away. And so I'm like, I'm about to be damned. I'll be damned. You know what I mean? We've got away from that. And I'm going to a motel then across town, completely way across town, almost out of town, so that I can hit the woods if I had to. And as we pulled over to get some clothes and some stuff, and on the west side of Tulsa, and even the guy driving, I'm feeling relaxed at this point. I'm like, I'll be down. You know what I mean? I made this. I handed them back that last 15 years, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, so I wasn't, you know, all the way up to that point, you know, I'm afraid to be cocky about it, you know what I mean? Because being cocky has never worked out for me, you know what I mean? As soon as I start getting a little full of myself, something smacks me down, you know?
What is it, about 24 hours past since
This
you
is now,
left?
I'm about 12 hours into this at this point. And, or maybe more, a little bit more, but it's, my driver tells me, God damn, I know there sure is a lot of blacked out windows, you know what I mean, and tinted windows and stuff, and I'm thinking, man, this dude's just, you know what I mean, I don't even do and stuff, so I finally relaxed, you know what I mean, I don't mess with that stuff and nothing, so I don't on the paranoid thing, and I'm just assuming that he is, you know what I mean, and because I don't even see it, you know what I mean, and anyway, we leave. We're back on the highway again, and we're cruising, and I'm really thinking, okay, man, you know what I mean? I'm starting to make plans of what I'm going to do, and I'm going to change my hair color, and I'm going to do this and that, you know, and all of a sudden he hits the brakes, and he's like, "What the?" And I look over at him, and he's looking at the rearview mirror, and I see something up ahead of us, you know what I mean? And there's red and blue lights ahead of us, and there's a line of them behind us, and I'm like, what the fuck, you know what I mean, how is that even possible? Because I knew there was nobody following us when we left. I thought that's why I relaxed, because I thought there's no way they could pinpoint me now, and because nobody knew, and I wouldn't let anybody talk on the phone and tell them where we were at or nothing, so I'm thinking we're good. So it was just such a shock to me, you know. And
who gave you up, do you think?
Oh, well, somebody told them, they found somebody that told them the apartment building that my daughter lived in. They didn't know where she lived exactly. They just knew what apartments. That's why when they went there, they had somebody sitting out there. They did have somebody sitting out in that parking lot watching, but they didn't know where to go, what the room number was, the apartment number was yet. So I didn't know all this, of course, but but when I found out, what happened was the guy that was watching said, I don't know if this is because I changed clothes, you know, and I got my arm in a sling, and I got a ball cap on, you know, my hair, I had long hair at the time, and it was all tucked up under my hat. And so he told them he didn't know, but he sees a guy that could maybe possibly fit the description, get into a red truck. And so they told him to stay put, you know, and they let me drive off. Well, just by some stroke of fate, you know, luck on their part, bad luck on mine, as we're going down the freaking highway, leaving, after I see that nobody's followed us, they spot the red truck going. They're going the other way, headed towards my daughter's apartment complex, and they see that red truck. So they whip it around and they start trying to catch up. And then of course they call in the other people and they start following us. And unbeknownst to me, totally clueless, you know what I mean? And so when they finally did, and they even followed us through that neighborhood where I told you we stopped for a second, you know, and which just allowed them more time to gather more forces. And so they, when they pulled us over, you know, I'm telling the dude, they're telling him, driver, throw the keys out. I'm like, that and drive off, you know, but and he throws the keys out, which I don't blame him. I'm not mad at him, you know what I mean, for that. But, you know, I'm just like, I couldn't even believe what's happening, really. But so he gets out, he's laying down. That leaves me and my daughter, she's a wild child, you know what I mean? She's not going to give up easy either. But they're telling me to get out. They're going to shoot and do this and that, and she's just begging me to comply at this point, you know. Yeah. And because she's afraid she's not getting out. She's trying to like keep me from being shot, so she doesn't want to leave. But I'm like, you know, I break my phone. I don't want anybody else to get any heat, you know. And I'm just so stunned at that point that they had got me. You know what I mean? And this is 12, 13, 14 hours later after all the shit I just went through, you know, and I'm sitting in the, I'm just so, I don't know what really come over me. It's kind of, I don't know. I don't really think of my cop as is something that I think about or anything. I just don't think sometimes, you know what I mean? I just get mad, I get frustrated, and I just blink out. So finally, you know, I just got out of the truck and I told them, you know, you and they come running up, you know, and the guy had a shotgun, you know, and he runs up and I'm like, you know, when I turn around and I take off and he shot me right in the back. And, you know, I honestly thought that I was dead. I thought it's over with. And it's the weirdest thing. It was almost relief.
What did he shoot you with? The bean
It was
bags
a
or
bean
the...
bag about this big that left a freaking black mark on my back that would knock me to my knees. But I didn't know this.
Feels like you're shot, right?
They come in shotgun, and they shoot them out of shotguns and a shotgun shell. And so, honestly, I didn't realize that I hadn't been really shot. I didn't realize I hadn't been killed until I hit the ground. I hit my knees, and then I just was going to refuse to die until I died, and I stood back up. As soon as I was able to stand back up, you know, I mean, breathe, I knew that it was a beanbag or something. I knew it wasn't a shotgun shell tearing my chest out, and so I took off again. They shot me with the tasers, and I don't know how I got loose from that, but I got loose from that. And they're all converging on me now. And then the dog come after me, and at this time I'm at the fence, and they're all, you know what I mean, they're yelling and threatening to shoot me. And I guess the dog probably kept from shooting me because he was in the way. And you know, and I turned around and I think the dog got into the wires a little bit because, you know what I mean, I turned around and just smacked him, you know, and he just looked at me stupidly instead of just tearing my arm off. You know, he just looked like, I think he was wrapped up in the wires a little bit. And I just, but then they just crawled all over me. The cops did, you know what I mean? And that was the end of that little escape. But,
so then they put you in the jail, and that's when Lockup comes to you about the interview.
Absolutely.
Now, do they bring you to see your son?
Well, they did they spent about a month and a half. They even left and went back to California and came back, you know, but they really got into the whole father and son. And then they started looking into who I was, you know, and I would tell them stories like I'm telling you, you know, sometimes when we were doing, you know, whatever. And they're the ones that actually said, man, you really ought to write a book. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm not that interested. But they'd be like, you know, they were like, yeah, you'd be surprised, you know. And so while Susan was gone, I wrote a story about when I escaped out of a bus from the county jail one time. And so I gave it to her when she come back, you know, and anyway, it just kind of develops, you know, the whole like pushing me in that direction type of thing. So I kind of credit that crew as the ones that really kind of like, and I enjoyed writing the story, you know, actually, and I realized, and it was actually pretty good. You know, I'm not as good at, you know, obviously you learn about how to write and do it better. And as you go, it's like peeling an onion, you know, learning writing in that language and all that. But but it was good, you know, it's interesting and I liked it and I enjoyed it. And it just something just, you know, developed in me with that.
And you get a lot of views on your episodes.
Yeah, the book sales and stuff go up a little bit. I don't know. It's hard for me. My wife will will notice when there's a boost or something, and she'll go back and find, oh, they aired this episode, you know, and you know, so yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm gonna try to get you as many book sales as I can. Tell the people what your book is and where they can get it.
Oh, it's The main one is American Outlaw, Price of Pride. It's pretty much tells you that everything that me and Staxx have been talking about. You know, a lot of it. If and I got a book called American Kid, The End of Innocence. That's we talked about that, and then another book called American Teenager, The War to the Court, and it covers everything up to the point where I went to that other place. I still have a couple books to go, but and then American Outlaw. I have a standalone book called Tangalai that I wrote about a bank burglar friend of mine, which I really enjoyed writing because it wasn't about me. You know, when you write about yourself, you have to stay in that the voice is only about what you knew and what you could see, what's coming from you. But as I wrote about him, I had all his paperwork and I had him. And so I seen what the cops were doing and how they got him, through his paperwork. And so I was able to kind of like, I put a disclaimer in there. I did give him a personality and different things, but I followed exactly how they found him and caught him and all that. But that was a fun story to write, because I could come at it from a more omnipotent.
It's a different perspective. Right?
Yeah. But they're on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, and I'll put a link in the description of the video, and you can check out his books. So, what's in store for the future for you?
We're building our following. I got merch out now. Some t-shirts and tank tops and things like that. We're going to do some more of that, but in the books but what we really are wanting to do is use the platform that we have in ways that can help other people. We're actually looking for businesses or people that are putting rallies together or whatever, that have charities that we can relate with, that we may be able to help with, and as well as stuff that we can do ourselves, and that we can be, we wanted to build our brand, but we want to build it in a way that's actually not just self-serving, but also serving others. I have a lot to overcome, and I think coming from where I came from and going as far as I can to being a righteous citizen that can be helpful to other people and to help guide people from doing the same things. I think that's a noble endeavor. It makes me feel like that life isn't wasted.
Definitely. Well, I look forward to seeing where your journey goes, and if you're ever interested in doing a documentary or a TV series, I know a lot of people, man. I could connect you in the right direction.
Hey, man, we're wherever this leads us, where it leads, and I'm down for just about anything. As long as we're just making progress in that direction.
Definitely. I appreciate you taking the time coming on my show, man.
Hey, man, that's an honor, man. It's an honor, brother.
Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to before we go?
Yes. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to my wife, Karen. I couldn't have done any of this without her. She's been with me the last 13 years, and staying true and standing by my side and, helping me to keep my head level and straight. And we're not, maybe getting out. She's really helped guide this whole path. And I just, if anybody deserves the most shout out, that would be her. And, of course, there's a few other people, and, like Tony Mack, and I told you about him. He's dead now, but he was a big inspiration for me. He used to be as bad as me. We used to rob dealers together, and they became an evangelist. And he became the kind of evangelist that was pure of heart. And he was an inspiration to me. Not that I'm nowhere near like he is, and I'm not going to be an evangelist, but I'm just that was my best friend, and he passed away, and I want to. If you ask me who deserves a lot of respect from me, and some of the changes in thought, ways of my thinking is that would be him. You know, my kids and my grandkids, they're like little, anchors in my life, and I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, man, no doubt. Well, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. If
All
you
right.
like this show, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get my videos every time they drop. And if you don't like this show, too bad. Start your own podcast.
Peace out, man.